I was still weak, but I could stand without holding onto the wall. I wrote that I was recovering from a serious medical event, that the doctor had put me on light duty, and that I would not be able to come down early on Saturday to set up chairs or carry heavy things. I asked if someone else could handle the setup so I could just come as a guest on Sunday. I pressed send, and I waited. My mother replied 4 minutes later. She didn't ask how I was feeling or if the bleeding had stopped. She wrote that everyone was tired, that this was Brooke's big week, and that if I was going to be resentful, maybe it was better if I stayed home. Brooke was stressed, she said, and nobody needed a dark cloud around the food. If you can't help, she wrote, don't bring the mood down for everyone else. That was it. That was the whole answer. Help, or stay away. Work, or don't come. Be useful, or be invisible. I stared at the screen for a long time until the light went out, and for the first time in my 34 years, I felt completely cured of the need to be understanding. I didn't reply. I called Gwen Ostrander back. We met on Friday morning at a coffee shop 3 towns over, somewhere none of my family would ever go. Gwen was sharply dressed with quiet manners, and she brought a thick folder of comparable sales and a map of the lakefront. She told me her clients were retired teachers, a couple who had been saving for 20 years to buy a quiet place where their grandchildren could swim in the summer. They didn't want to tear the place down or build a monstrosity, they just wanted a peaceful spot on the water. They had already looked at the public tax records, saw that there were no liens or encumbrances, and were prepared to make a clean, all-cash offer at full market value with no contingencies. The price she named was more money than I had ever seen at one time in my entire life. It was enough to clear my personal loan, put a substantial deposit on a home that was entirely my own, and leave me with a cushion so thick I would never have to worry about an unexpected bill again. Gwen looked at me across the small table and asked if I needed time to talk it over with my family. I took a slow sip of my tea, looked her straight in the eye, and told her that there was no family to consult. The deed was in my name alone, the taxes were paid by my account, and the decision was mine. She nodded, pulled out the paperwork she had already prepared, and handed me a pen. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name on the line marked seller, pressing hard enough to feel the ballpoint bite into the paper. The closing was set for 30 days out, but the contract was binding the moment I handed the pen back. On the drive home, the sky was clear and bright, and for the first time in weeks, the dull ache in my stomach didn't hurt at all. Saturday came and went in complete silence. My phone stayed quiet because I hadn't shown up to rake the gravel or wipe down the patio furniture. In the group chat, my sister posted a photo of my father struggling to unfold a heavy table on the grass, accompanied by a caption that said some people only show up when it is time to eat. I didn't reply, nor did I get angry. I simply packed a small bag with a fresh notebook, my original deed, the tax receipts, and the newly signed purchase agreement. I put on a simple navy dress, drove out to the lake, and parked down the lane just as the afternoon sun hit the trees, casting a bright golden light across the water. When I walked up the gravel driveway on Sunday afternoon, the party was already in full swing. White linens covered the long tables on the lawn, floating candles drifted in bowls of water, and a big banner stretched across the porch reading "Congratulations Brooke and Aiden." My sister was standing near the dock with a glass of champagne in her hand, wearing a cream-colored dress, while my mother held court by the food table, holding one of those gold-stamped napkins. About 20 people were there, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few neighbors from down the shore. When my mother saw me walking up the path, her face didn't soften with relief or concern. Instead, her posture stiffened, her eyebrows drawn tight in an expression of annoyance that I had dared to show up without earning my spot first. She met me near the bottom of the porch steps before I could reach the rest of the guests, holding her drink like a barrier between us. She told me quietly that she was surprised I had shown up after refusing to help, and that if I was going to bring a sour attitude, I should turn around right now. Brooke walked over a second later, arms crossed, looking me up and down as if checking for dirt on her lawn. She said it was a private family moment and that they were trying to keep things peaceful today. I looked at both of them, my mother with her sharp eyes and my sister with her staged smile, and I realized I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like an adult standing in front of two people who had mistaken my quietness for weakness for far too long. I reached into my bag, pulled out a neat white folder, and handed it directly to my mother. She looked down at it with confusion, refusing to take it at first until I pressed it gently against her hand. She opened it, expecting maybe a bill or a formal complaint, but the first thing her eyes landed on was the top page, the signed, legal purchase agreement with the bold red accepted stamp from the real estate agency. Behind it was a copy of the quitclaim deed from 6 years ago bearing her own signature, followed by 6 years of tax receipts paid solely in my name. My mother's face went completely pale, the color draining out of her cheeks so fast it looked as if she were the one who had spent 3 days in the hospital receiving blood transfusions. "What is this?" my mother whispered, her voice trembling as she flipped through the pages with shaking fingers. I kept my voice calm, smooth, and clear enough that my father, who had wandered over to see what was going on, could hear every word. I explained that the house had been sold to a lovely couple who would be taking possession at the end of the month, that the earnest money was already in escrow, and that everyone would need to have their personal belongings cleared off the property by the 28th. My sister gasped, dropping her champagne glass onto the grass where it shattered against a stone, spilling dark liquid across the lawn. She yelled that I couldn't do that it was the family's house, and that I was ruined everything on her special day. My father took the folder from my mother's hands, his face red as he looked over the tax documents, his mouth opening and closing without making a sound. He asked how I could sell their home out from under them without saying a word. I looked at him with steady eyes and told him the truth that none of them wanted to hear. I reminded them that 6 years ago, when the county was going to take this place from them, I spent my life savings and took out a loan to keep it in the family. I pointed out that for 6 years, I paid every bill, every tax, and every repair while they used it as a backdrop for their lives, treating me like hired help whenever I walked through the door. I looked my mother dead in the eye and reminded her of what she had said to the nurse while I lay bleeding in the emergency room, that I was always fine, that I could handle it alone, and that they were too busy enjoying the lake to come see if I was going to live. I pointed to the printed napkins sitting on the food table, the ones that celebrated a day without the drama, and told them that they were finally getting exactly what they asked for. I was leaving, the house was gone, and they would never have to worry about my drama ever again. The entire lawn fell completely silent. No one moved, no one spoke, and even the waves against the dock seemed to quiet down as the truth hung heavy in the warm afternoon air. My sister began to cry, complaining that they had nowhere else to hold the wedding reception, while my mother tried to grab my arm, her tone instantly shifting from cold authority to desperate begging. She asked how we could work this out, what it would take for me to stop the sale, and why I was doing this to my own blood. I gently stepped back out of her reach, closed my bag, and told her that the paperwork was signed, the contract was legally binding, and the decision was final. I told them that being family meant showing up when someone was down, not just when there was a party to throw, and that they had taught me exactly what I was worth to them. I turned around and walked back down the gravel driveway toward my car without looking back once. Behind me, I could hear the panicked hushed arguments starting up, my mother raised voice, my sister sobbing, and my father trying to figure out what they were going to do next, but none of it belonged to me anymore. As I opened my car door, the sun was setting over the lake, painting the water in brilliant shades of gold and deep pink, beautiful and still. I sat in the driver's seat, started the engine, and took a deep, clear breath, feeling the air fill my lungs completely. For the first time in my life, I wasn't holding anyone else up, I wasn't fixing anyone else's mistakes, and I was finally, truly fine.